You can watch Exeter TV online at exeternh.tv, Apple TV, and on Roku. Find us on social media for extra content. Subscribe to our YouTube channel and hit the bell to get notified about live streams and new content. Tune in to our platforms every other Friday to watch the Exeter Biweekly Report with recaps of recent events, updates from town departments, and messages from nonprofits in your area. If you head to our website, exeternh.tv, we invite you to sign up to our newsletter to receive monthly updates about new content, upcoming meetings, and more. We'd like to thank you for taking the time to watch Exeter TV and hope that you tune in to our other content as well.
November 2nd, 2022 meeting of the Exeter Budget Recommendations Committee. My name is Bob Kelly. I'm the chair of the committee as well as chair of the Water and Sewer and DPW General Subcommittees. We'll begin with committee introductions as soon as my vice chair is able to take a seat.
Thanks. Appreciate your patience.
No rush.
I have ADD, okay? I tend to overschedule myself.
So you're up.
All right, Christine Suter, and I'm in charge of, or the subcommittee chair for the Library, Parks and Rec, and Human Services.
Christopher Zigmont, 22 Crestview, and I am also on Parks and Rec, Public Library, and Human Services.
Evening, everyone. Corey Stevens, Finance Director.
Russell Dean, Town Manager.
Jennifer Perry, Public Works Director.
Dave Perkins, Highway Superintendent. Andrew Elliott, DPW General Subcommittee.
Chris Newport.
Anthony Zwan, 7 Marlborough Street, serving on the Water and Sewer Subcommittee.
Judy Rowan, 33 Princess Way, Chair of the Police Fire Subcommittee.
Liz Canada, 58 Columbus Ave, Library, Parks and Rec, Human Services.
Thank you and welcome all. We also have off mic Melissa Roy, the Assistant Town Manager, Andy Swanson, our IT Director, Nico Papacasantis, the Select Board's Chair, I think, still, right? Julie Gilman and Nancy Belanger, also of the Select Board, and Joanna Bartel, our minutes taker. So this evening, we'll be talking about the DPW general budget. I think you all received the narrative and general budget outlay a couple of days ago. Andrew Elliott and myself met with Jen and Jay Perkins, as well as one of Jay's associates, and went over the various, I think there are 8 different divisions in the general DPW department, and water and sewer, the other 2 divisions, will be discussed in a couple of weeks. Welcome, Jen and Jay. And the way we'll do it, I'll sort of go through the various lines and the issues that we had, that Andrew and I had, and then if you guys have comments or want to interject, certainly feel free to do that. And likewise, if anyone in the committee does as well. The DPW general budget was, I think, relatively straightforward. Yes, this is page 18 of the budget book, is the beginning of the Public Works budget. You'll notice that a lot of the, especially the field work functions, were not, some of them not even 50% spent yet. And just as a highlight, a lot of, since our town meeting form of government, we don't get approval until March. A lot of times paving and outside work, the weather in New England limits our ability to even start some projects until May. Then we hit summer and other things happen. So a lot of the projects that we have, especially paving oriented and pipeline work that Jay specifically works on, don't really get done until the end of the year. So that is the general explanation as to why some of the items are not fully spent. If there are any critical items, we have mentioned those in the report, and we can talk about those in more detail if you want. So to begin in administration, the big item here is the request for a new, it's highlighted as a new GIS, Geographic Information System technician. Realistically, it's an overall manager. We've been converting from hand and pencil and drawing documentation of our various utilities in town for a number of years. But we've sort of had a slipshod approach to actually having a person in charge of keeping those files and that data up to date. We get the data in the field, but we don't always have someone who's available to convert it into actual working drawings and databases that we need to make our systems run efficiently. So the request here is for a new person, the details of which are shown actually on page 29 of 28. It's that last flyleaf in tab 2. It's an overall, an annual impact of $94,000. That would be for full-time, which won't happen until 2024. Next year, between, again, town meeting and the anticipation of a long, drawn-out hiring process, which we've been experiencing over the last few years, the budget here is for only 6 months. And this would be funded 60% in this budget and then 20% each in water and sewer, which we'll discuss in a couple of weeks. So Andy Swanson is here to discuss, maybe you could spend a couple of minutes talking about the details of this person, and then if there are any questions by the committee. Andy, my understanding is the one to ask.
I guess so. We know we've been having these databases for a very long time, and we have a lot of different people, including DPW, which is a huge user, and every group has their own needs from this database, and those are always competing with each other because nobody really knows there's no cartographers in the whole bunch, including myself. So we meet regularly and try to discuss this because this is getting worse because now the vendors are quibbling over business pieces and things like that. So we need to get our hands around it, and somebody needs to understand. They practically have to be a map maker, literally a cartographer, because that's the kind of data that you need to look at. We've been meeting for many months, and we currently have some funding to fix today's problems. We're just trying to get those sent out, to the vendors who can do it, which of course nobody has any time these days because everybody lost half their help. But we're on our way to that. We have approved funds to fix that, but it's only going to fix it now, and then 3 years from now, it's going to get all shifted again. Yes.
I'm just wondering, which I tend to do, dive right into the details.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
No. Just, can you explain a little bit about how the GIS person will, what they're doing for, what they would be doing for the department and how it benefits the town? Yeah,
so, the first thing to understand is that water and sewer right now are the most probably heavily invested, but there's a lot of departments invested too good to be in, and some others that want to become invested. So I'm hoping that we get somebody in there that understands that we need to look at the big picture and make this work. But we meet and nobody really, like I said, none of us are cartographers. They're all doing the best they can and they all want to meet their needs. And I don't know how to do that. I can't read their minds. And plus, I'm not a map maker either. So somebody needs to run that whole database and understand what the needs of all the people that are using it are. And then we don't have anybody here that can even come close to doing that.
Right now, there's no centralization of the system, so we have a lot of different departments sort of doing their own thing. Mm-hmm. And this person, the idea behind this person is that they're going to come in and pull all of that together and coordinate the operation of the system and be able to manage the layers that go with the GIS system so that we're all always on the same page. Right now, it's hard to get everybody on the same page because you've got many different departments that are sort of doing their own thing within the GIS system that we have.
Yeah, myself included. I know that GIS is very complicated and it's so.
Right.
It's also extremely helpful though for the people that need to use it.
That's why people do it.
And amongst our issues there's 3 different databases, even though they're all the same database. And they're never in sync because we don't understand the whole issue. I think that's really boils down to it. we raised that concern since I got here, because this was already in place when I got here 17 years ago. But it's gotten worse partly because we are going in with more detail than we ever did before. And people are leaning on it and depending on it more than they ever did before. And, like suddenly emergency services, which I would have thought were on day one, now they want in, they want to figure it out, and they're like the last of the table. I'm not blaming anybody, and I'm just saying that we need somebody that understands the whole situation and can put it in the proper perspective. And I do apologize. I meant to write something up and bore you all while I read it, and then we had a telephone pole hit today.
Thank you for that.
We had a telephone pole hit earlier today, and I was sort of out that site almost all the time today because we have duties to perform if something happens on the poles.
And I'd just like to add, the reason that Public Works promoted this is that we have an immediate need. We're constantly having to provide the regulators, whether it's DES or our consulting engineers, with our latest updated information. And frequently, it's 6 months, a year old, 2 years old, and we just don't have dedicated staff that can maintain those databases and the GIS system. But we recognize that there are other departments that are going to have similar needs, but they're related, but they're not the same. You've got assessing, planning and building, emergency services. So we felt that at least we could promote it because we could use it 100% right now. And others can come on. We've developed some good tools to use through People GIS. But we really need to have a dedicated individual who is assigned to making sure the layers are all up to date, can create new maps when somebody comes in and asks to see, where are all the valves that were installed after 1980 or before 1980. We just don't have the time to be able to do that. So it's absolutely essential to municipal operations in this day and age, and I would say that all of the communities around us already have a GIS person that's dedicated to doing this work. So we're a little bit behind the times.
Tom? She answered the question just now. Thank you.
I had one question. I'm looking at the annual salary. Can you find someone at that salary in this job market? It seems like a highly trained person.
It's very, very low, I'll be honest with you. We did set this, I believe it was a grade 8 position, but as we've been discussing in greater detail and gone through this more and more over the last several months, I think we will be hard pressed to find somebody. But, we've got to start somewhere. We haven't had this position, and this was what we felt comfortable with at this point in time.
Quick question, Mr. Chair. Yeah, so Jennifer, you probably got to this a little bit at the top of your discussion, that you guys have an immediate need for this post, but clearly across many departments there's a need for this. So I guess my question is, does it belong in the place we're looking at it? That was the first question. And my second question would be, are other municipalities of our size outsourcing this or cloud-basing this at all, or are we finding that people of our general size are having this on staff?
I would say in general, municipalities of our size have this staff on staff. We have been outsourcing it, and that's the problem. It takes a long time to batch things up, and when do we send it, and assessing is doing it at a different time than Public Works Utilities is doing it, and so it's kind of a piecemeal approach that really needs to be more cohesive. And the first part of your question, I'm sorry.
Does it belong in this?
We did have those discussions. I think probably Public Works has the most experience. We have one person who's familiar but isn't an expert, and certainly he's a manager and doesn't have time to be dedicating his time. He could if that were the only thing he were assigned, but he's managing our water and sewer utilities, so it's not appropriate to be set there. But we did talk about that possibility, whether it's with IT or another, general department, but we figured at this point this was where it should go.
I think the general view was that it was like 50/50 of the highways, which Jay covers, and then water and sewer, which
would be the full.
Matt Ruby covers. And what makes it a 60/40 is that assessing and planning will also be using it. So since it's in the general fund, that's, I think, in general, what it's split 64.
Okay. Yep.
Sorry, Chris.
No, that's a good question. I was thinking it should come out of a lot of budgets. I know that, and I try to be financially, fiscally conservative, but I also know that if the salary's too low, you're not going to get anybody, and you definitely need somebody. I know that, and I don't know, it's been a while since I've been in Durham, but I know Durham was smaller than us. They were looking for somebody finally, and they're smaller than us. So then you're competing with them, and I know that they try to pay well so that they can get the best people. So if there's limited GIS people out there, and we've got a serious need. If there's, I almost think it's pointless to advertise something if you think if the salary is too low. Because then you're going to spend a whole year waiting to get approval to spend a little bit more while we, suffer. So I don't know. I think that's something to think about, as much as knowing that there's other towns looking to hire, knowing that there's a need across the town for this. Why? I wouldn't bother at all if you don't think anybody's going to take the salary and you can't be approved for more until a year later.
Well,
that concerns me.
a mechanism could be we just approved the budget that's presented to us.
Right.
However, it's defined both at the deliberative session and then in voting in March. So we have until the deliberative session potentially to maybe do some research or test the waters and see if we have a chance of doing anything. And then maybe it could be adjusted accordingly. But I agree with Jen. We got to start somewhere. Let's start. And if we get a beginning person in there, then maybe they'll evolve and maybe the program will evolve. And we'll see where it goes. But we got to start somewhere. And $94,000 is not nothing.
No,
well, I think it's 54,000.
Well, that's for half the year.
That's for half a year. It's 94 for the full year.
They're going to get...
Well, I'm looking at, after benefits are taken out, the actual salary is $54,000 a year.
The salary, you're right.
Yeah. And that's...
But benefits are pretty significant.
Another quick question to add on to that. Did you research other towns to see what they're paying a full-time GIS person?
Well, again, this is a little bit... We run into some challenges when we look at the title of the position, because it could be a technician, an analyst, a manager. You start to go up the ladder.
Supervisor.
And again, this would be a starting level position, probably technician / analyst. Ultimately, yes, we do need a manager, but this level of funding does not reflect a manager.
Okay. Thank you.
So just for the viewers at home, just for clarification, we all know this, we're throwing around these numbers, but just to reinforce what you said, when we hire someone, $26,000 of the number is the health insurance, right? So the actual salary is substantially less than that. I just want to have said that, just in case people watch this later and just don't pick up on that.
Were you done with your thought, Chris? I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt.
Yeah, it's just, is there a mechanism to offer more or is the budget, like that's the...
Well, when we approve it, that becomes baked into the budget. But again, it's not a final budget until, the select board reviews it, and then we look at it at deliberative session, and then we vote on it.
Yeah, that was just, I think, the same concern. That works out to, like $25 an hour. And, I don't mean to make a joke, but like Dunkin' Donuts, I think is $20 an hour, So is it reasonable that you're going to find, that's just my only comment. Is it reasonable anyone will even want the job?
I've lived in town for a long, long time. And to start off with again, next year would be almost $95,000 between wages and benefits. That's not insignificant. And again, I would say let's start somewhere, because if we reach too high, then you're at risk of not getting it. So I'd rather get somebody in there and then grow the position, and then see what we need to do after that.
We'll see what we see. We'll see what we get.
Liz?
Yeah, I do think it would be helpful, even in the different roles, technician, manager, whatever it is, to see what other communities are actually paying their folks. Just because, yes, the budget is the budget, we're going to move forward with this, but if there's someone in deliberative session who wants to propose something there and make a solid argument, that information would be really helpful in that way. So maybe not for today, but before then.
I also want to put it out there, ask the question another way. So what happens if we get into the next year and this budget as written makes it through the select board and makes it, and it gets approved, and then we don't find somebody? What does next year look like without somebody?
Well,
Status quo.
Yeah, we would have to come back again before the committee and talk about whether we needed to be increasing it. It wouldn't be filled. It would be the way it is today, and those funds wouldn't be expended. That's why we do have a few positions within Public Works that have remained vacant for some time, and that's partly why you do see some of those lower expenditure rates on those wage lines and benefits lines.
Judy?
Back to the totally uneducated. Could you just explain about the GIS? That is, that when the town does something physical, for example, or the development is approved, somebody logs into a system the information about what is occurring physically, the pipes, the structures, and so forth, all of that, somebody logs into a system somewhere?
That's correct. That's essentially what it is.
And many departments may do that in their own way, perhaps.
Yeah, in their own way. I don't think any of the other departments are entering data per se. Public Works does, and we also work with People GIS to do that. And I believe Assessing sends theirs to Cartographics, who were the original GIS and mapping vendor that the town started working with back in, I think, 1996. And they're still in business, but we've kind of migrated away from them because it's a fairly expensive operation, and we can do some of it. They're not interested in what year valve we're looking at, but we are. I mean, and I'm sure other departments, like Andy said, whether it's public safety or planning, may have other needs that they want to be able to track. So
the DPW staff is used to entering the data, but
irregularly, not on a regular basis.
Just in my small world, we just cleaned catch basins. We just cleaned over 400 of them, and they tried using the tablets, but they kept losing signal, and so they handwrite everything, and that has to be entered, and there's a lot of data in those, with sediment levels, condition assessments, invert levels, to make sure everything's the same, and that we still don't have everything captured. And all that has to go in, and we have to report that to the EPA each year.
So you would have to follow up on all of that, since there's nobody else managing or monitoring the quality of the data that goes in, or the completeness.
Right.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Well, Andrew and I, as a subcommittee, supported this hire, and seeing no other discussion, we will have that as part of our budget. The only other item in administration was just a note on office supplies, which relates to my earlier comment about again, the budget doesn't get approved until March. So sometimes supplies, and both in the field and the office, are caught up at the end of the year, as it were. Any other questions in administration? Corey, do you have an updated benefits tool?
Yes. New benefits total is $243,521, $243,521.
Thank you. And a new bottom line for the administration.
Right, total for administration is $484,105, 484,105.
I'll make a motion to accept that.
Thank you. Chris Suter, any second?
Second.
Andrew, seconds. Further discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Thank you. On to highways and streets. Again, a couple of items at play here. One is that we try to avoid disrupting a lot of in-town roadway networks during the summer and festival season in September and October. So Jay ends up doing a lot of work in late October through when the snow flies. So a number of the lines in highways and streets are underspent, but will be spent. I think, I don't know if everyone picked up, but there was a sheet that was distributed by Public Works that described the number of vacancies there are in the Public Works department right now, and many of them are in the field and equipment operators, which makes it very difficult to do field work. We end up either having to shoehorn those in with daily operations or subbing those out using the funding available and hiring contractors, many of which are not available because they're off doing their own projects. So it's a balancing act that the department has to conduct, and hopefully most of the work that needs to get done is completed.
Bob, I'd just like to add a little kind of a overview of vacancies, at least within the highway team. People need to understand that right now there's an incredible demand for anybody who has a commercial driver's license. We're competing not just with other municipalities, but with the private sector. And it's tough to hold on to people, especially if they haven't been here a long time. And so we're seeing more turnover than we typically would, but we are filling vacancies. It's just that then we'll get another vacancy. And so it's kind of this rotation that's going on. It's not to be unexpected right now with what we're challenged with, but we are continuing to fill vacancies. It's just, they could be 2, 3, even 4 months out for some of these positions.
Any questions on some of the expense items on page 19? If not, I'd like to flip over to 20 and discuss the paving line item, 55251. As you'll see, this has been reduced to $700,000 in-house. Typically, our expenditures, we went from a $500,000 paving budget a number of years ago to $800,000, which was still less than what the highway superintendent and the town engineer thought was necessary to keep the town's roads adequately paved, but so be it, we had to fit it into the overall budget. This year, it's being asked to be reduced by $100,000. We have done a very large piece of work in town on Linden Street that will eat up a lot of the $800,000 budget this year. We also have pending projects in Marshall Farms and on Washington Street that hopefully can be conducted by the end of the year. This is always one of those discussion points that everybody in Exeter likes clean roads, both from a paving standpoint and a snow plowing standpoint. But there are some constraints that we're dealing with this year, and hopefully this will be adequate. But it's suggested in the note in the report that we'll need to keep our finger on the pulse of that, and I've asked Jay to sort of keep a tally of not only the projects that he does, but also the projects that he could have done if he had the time and the budgets, because we really need to get our arms around, what exactly is the right number for paving to keep the town of Exeter the way we like it. Any comments?
I did just want to
Jen?
make one point of clarification. We are wrapping up Linden Street, as you had mentioned, and we're also doing the sidewalk in that section between the Exeter River and Little River. And that's the majority of the expenditures for paving this year. Next, we're going to be moving to Marshall Farms. We have 2 streets in Marshall Farms, Colonial and Heritage. And that was going to be the end of this year's paving budget. Washington Street is out year. I don't know exactly what year, so I just needed to make that clarification. The only thing is, here it is, November.
Yeah.
We're having a very mild fall, but that can change very quickly. And if we can't complete the streets in Marshall Farms, we will put in a request for an encumbrance and do that work as soon as we can next year.
Excellent. Corey, could we get an updated benefits total for highways and streets?
Yep, updated number for benefits for highway and streets, $377,352, 377,352.
Thank you. And then an updated highways and streets budget total?
$2,092,636, 2,092,636.
I'll entertain a motion for that amount.
Second.
No, somebody make a motion, please?
I'll make the motion for that
Thank you.
amount, 2,092,636, highways and
Tom.
streets.
Second, Judy.
Further discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you. Andrew and I had no significant issues on snow removal. If anyone has any questions, I'll entertain those, but everything seemed to be fairly straightforward.
We didn't get snow this year?
We didn't get snow this year. We'll see what happens. Updated benefits total and snow removal, Corey?
$15,012, 15,012.
Same, okay. And so same total, 313,016?
That's correct.
I will entertain a motion for $313,016 for snow removal.
So moved.
Second, Judy.
Liz made that motion. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Thank you. On the solid waste budget, the big one here is the disposal and recycling contract. What I'd like to have Jen, just give a brief overview of sort of the pressures. We just started a new contract this past June with Waste Management, a new 5-year contract. There's anticipated to be some potentially significant fuel surcharges on that, and there's also some pressure on the recycling markets these days. So Jen, if you could just spend a couple minutes and provide an overview.
So we did, the select board did sign a 5-year contract extension with Waste Management that began the new cycle in June of this year. And into that contract were planned escalations, approximately 6% per year, because with the last contract, Waste Management had not been recuperating all of their expenditures, all their expenses, and so they needed to catch up, and we did agree to that. And I keep a very close track on this particular line in the budget because it's a single line, but it's probably our highest dollar amount for any single line. It's about $1 million. And so part of the contract includes a fuel surcharge. So anything that is over their base rate when we signed of $2.90 for diesel, is we wind up having to pay a calculated amount. The first 6 months, we had kind of a gratis period or no charge surcharge during that period, but in December, we'll start a new period of fuel surcharges. And I've been watching every single week what the Pad 1A, which is the diesel in New England, is. And I'm estimating that we're going to be paying approximately $4,109 a month in a fuel surcharge. And that's pretty much guaranteed. I don't see why their calculation would be any different than mine. We had an agreed upon index that we were using. The other major variable, and so, excuse me, for the next year, that increases our contract cost by almost $43,000. I don't know how long that surcharge will remain valid. I'd like to think that maybe by 6 months from now, we're looking at a lower fuel surcharge, and they do reassess it every 6 months. So I guesstimated that it'll be a little bit lower in 6 months, because I'm an optimist, but it's really difficult to predict it, as anybody can imagine. The other major cost increase has just been experienced in the last 2 months, and that's the cost of our recycling. Recycling does have a cost. It's not that it has that great a value. Earlier in the year, we had been, and I didn't turn to my page, but I think I used a value of something like $50 or $60 per ton for recycling when I put my budget together in August. The last 2 months, it has crept up to $120 per ton, and this last month it was $150 per ton. I've had panicked phone calls and conversations with Waste Management, and Jay and I have been really digging in to understand what's the reason for this high jump. This is the highest jump we've ever seen, even compared to when China shut down the recycling market. And there's a couple of things going on that are really getting into the weeds, and you may not be interested in, so I won't bore you with it. But my concern is that only using $50 a ton, which is what I used in August, is not enough. It's not a conservative enough number to go forward. And I recommend that we should be budgeting about $120 a ton for next year. At least we'll be a little bit over. I don't think it's going to stay at 150. I just don't see that as the reasons they're giving. It's just not sustainable, and we'll have to look at something else. But we don't like stopping recycling for a few months, telling people to not recycle, or not to recycle bottles, or not to recycle cardboard, and then get them back on board when it becomes more valuable. It becomes very confusing to the public, and it's really important to kind of stay the course during these volatile times, but it's really very concerning at those rates. So,
can I ask a question? Would you mind getting a little into the weeds as to why they're, because I think it's important as it affects every household in town, so.
So we were told initially that it's because all the paper mills are shut down, and right now there is zero demand for OCC, which is old corrugated cardboard. The paper mills are, kind of drive that demand for it, and it's shut down. So everybody's stockpiling. There's way too much material on hand, and the markets are just down. And plastics are another, as I think most people realize, plastics are very difficult to recycle. They don't really have a whole lot of value, at least the way we do it in a mixed environment. If we were just we're just doing number 2 or we're just doing number 1, there's a little bit more value to it. But there's just a lot of up in the air, and with all of the costs for fuel and electricity, it's tied to that too. So it's a really tough time right now, but I've seen it where it goes really high like this for a few months and then it tends to come back down. But just like everything, it's up like a rocket and down like a feather. And that's where I feel 120 is probably a better number to run with than the $50 a ton. Is it just...
And this is not just the U.S. market, excuse me, it's the global markets right now. So it's everywhere.
So the question becomes, Andrew and I talked about this, and I mean, my feeling is we sort of ride out the storm and see how it goes. We do have some fallback with the reserve accounts and, some switching around of budget numbers. However, this looks like somewhat of a crisis in the making. So I don't know, sort of throw it out to the committee as to, our initial thought was to keep the budget the way it was presented, but it might be prudent to change it somewhat.
Do you have that number, Bob, or the estimate?
The number that they had indicated was $1,160,000, which would be about $70,000, or would be $70,000 more than what they had requested. Which, because of the new contract, is $94,000 more than what it was last year. And that's just the nature of solid waste. I mean, at some point in the not too distant future, the Rochester landfill is going to close, and then we're all going to be in the soup. So it can be $300 a ton. Ton?
Just so I'm clear on it, Jen, the number as presented, $1,090,000, so 1,090,000, does not include your anticipated fuel surcharges of 44,000, or does?
It does include the fuel surcharge.
It does include that.
It does include the fuel, but it does not include this very recent spike in the recycling.
Recycling, okay, so that's the unknown part of it.
Yep.
Okay.
Thank you, that's a great question. How long ago did that spike start with the recycling?
Just the last 2 months, it was, and we don't have, there's always a little bit of a delay. We don't have October's numbers yet, but it was August and September. August was 120, September was 150.
So we know there's going to be a shortfall at this point. I would say, I don't think anything's going to, like you said, I like how you said, up like a rocket, down like a feather. We're just a couple months away from the new year, so I think the smart thing to do would be budget a little bit more. We don't have to do 70,000, but some.
It's actually 170. I misspoke.
Oh,
I
God.
miscalculated.
All right, this is going to be very.
Yeah, it's 170.
No, it is 70.
It's 70.
It is 70.
All right.
Right, 70.
No,
It is 70,
That's still
okay.
quite a bit,
Yeah.
so,
Mr.
I mean,
Math major.
I try to be optimistic, but I can't see how that could possibly, not be higher than budgeted at this point. The prices are insane, but they are, and if we're going to have the service, we have to pay them. So I think at least, maybe budget for half the anticipated increase, something, versus being in the hole.
Andrew?
I just have one question. Is the fee related to the quality of the recycling, or is it just general?
That's a great question. I mean, we can be fined if the quality isn't meeting spec, if there's too much contamination. But we haven't received that many fines. I think we had 2 this year, and they were pretty minor.
Okay.
But, overall, I would say yes. If, let's say, everything were the most valuable, what's the most valuable commodity of everything we recycle? Probably
Glass.
the glass, maybe. I don't know if it is glass.
Heavy
Office
cardboard.
paper. Office paper, if it were just office paper, yes, we'd probably be getting better, but it isn't. It's old OCC, it's glass, it's aluminum, it's broken glass in the paper, it's plastic with a lot of contamination.
Since we had spoken, I had heard on NPR like other towns are actually creating fees for contaminating the recycling now, where they could now potentially recoup some of those costs. I think it was Lee I heard about that. I don't know if we should consider something for this town, but we tell people to put in clean recycling, but if If they don't do it, then there's a revenue stream on the other end. Not that I think you really should, but
No, I mean, it makes a lot of sense in one respect. I mean, there are towns and other places that actually have managed to figure out how to take all 7 plastics and find markets for them, but it's very rare. I think it ends up being more punitive and people stop recycling, so then you end up putting more of those.
Yeah, that's a really good point.
It's like, I'm not going to risk paying a fine, I'm just going to chuck it.
Everything in the trash
And it goes in the
bag.
blue bag and no one ever knows, right?
Yeah.
So I think that the challenge is we want to continue to encourage people to do it.
Not punitive.
And
carrot, no stick.
Exactly. It's really hard, yeah.
That's a fair point. Thanks, Chris.
Tom?
From a budget point of view, I'm with Chris. I just wonder if we should just adjust the number halfway between what we have, and I hate just randomly picking a number, but meeting it halfway. I mean, we have, we like to budget in reality, and it seems like that's the reality right now.
Well, except there's only one person in the room who's actually done calculations to come up with a number, and that's Jen.
Yeah.
Anything we come up with would be, a guess.
That would be the argument for doing the full.
Well, she's suggested 70,000
Okay.
to bump it
But
up to
again,
1,160.
It's my projection. It's a projection.
Well, but it's an informed projection.
Informed projection, but I think a little bit, going halfway, a little bit, that's not a little bit, I apologize. Halfway is better than what I initially estimated in August, and, we'll continue we do our best to educate. We constantly conversing with Waste Management about what else can we do differently. We started the textile recycling program. We started the residential food waste composting. We're trying to find other ways to get our volumes down, and we can continue to do those things. But
Well, I think, first of all, high marks to all you guys that you are doing. I mean, the food waste program is great, the textile recycling is great, and, the grim reality is that this number is, it's nothing that anyone's doing wrong. It's just, it's consumption, right? We're putting a lot of stuff in bins and sending it and just hoping it goes away, and it has to go away somewhere, and someone has to pay for it, and it's in our budget. And so, I would support, as difficult as it is, to work a little closer to your projection, but I also think we owe it to the taxpayers to let them know very specifically what this number's tied to, and we all have an opportunity to work on that consumption at home, and the less stuff we put in the bin, the lower the number can be, right? And it's one of those things that really does work. If we just put less in the bin, the lower the number will be. So, because if we go halfway or not even that, the number's going to come in when the number comes in, right? It's just your projections are grounded in reality. So I would certainly support going at least halfway, if not all the way to what your projection is.
Well, halfway would be a $35,000 increase to the budget, so that would be a new budget for that line of $1,125,000. If that's the way we're inclined, or as Jen had suggested, her calculations would support a $1,160,000 increase, which is basically, just for some comparison, if you look at the bottom of the solid waste disposal total on page 21, that'd be roughly double what the increase is for that line. So instead of a 5% increase, it'd be somewhere in the 9 to 10% increase for that division. So, again, at this point, it's sort of pick a number.
Yeah, and I understand what you're saying, and the goal for, I think, all apartments were asked to, make cuts, but you're going to have to pay the bill, whether you make the cuts or not.
Exactly.
So it's kind of like, I only said half because, it seemed like asking for all of it, there might be some pushback, but I feel strongly that more money needs to go in there. I'd support putting it all in there, and if we get lucky and it goes down, it goes down, but this isn't something that you can say, well, we just won't pay them. Yeah, exactly, they just won't cart it away. So honestly, and this begs another question that I have, and it's a bigger question. You can answer it later if you want to think about it a little bit, but I'd be curious, especially because this is such a big department as far as the running of the town and the expenses and what it costs to do what you do. It just costs a lot. The budget that you have on the table, what are your biggest concerns about that budget?
Overall, within Public Works?
Yeah, like the numbers that you've put forth, what are your biggest concerns about how we're going to meet that number?
This line was the biggest one
This is the
coming in
one?
tonight.
Okay.
Yeah. I think the rest, we've been at this for a little while.
Yeah.
I think we feel fairly confident. I mean, when we talk about CIP and equipment in another night, there may be some things that we'd love to address, but they, most of them can be deferred. It's just the town winds up spending more later in deferral.
Oh, yeah.
And so we're always careful to try and find the right break even where we're replacing things and doing projects when we think we should. But as far as a regular maintenance line item budget, I'd say this is the one.
Okay, thank you.
Andrew?
Just out of curiosity, if there was a shortfall in this line, since I'm new to the budget, would it just be pushed from the general fund as, like, you gotta pay the bill, so where does the revenue come, or where does the...
Russ?
Yeah, we'd have to rob Peter to pay Paul. So we'd start with the department budget and try to make reductions in the department budget to offset the increase in the solid waste bill.
And last year, I'm just trying to remember, there was several $1 million in the general fund that wasn't spent. I remember at the...
Well, that's our savings account.
That's the savings account,
It's not
right.
that it wasn't spent, it's just that's our buffer.
Yeah, that's a buffer.
Against catastrophe.
Right, yes. Of course, but $70,000 compared to several $1 million, I know it could be absorbed, and next year we could ask for another 5% increase instead of a 10% increase this year. I think that's why originally I had said, let's ride this one out, but I'm happy to go higher too, as obviously it's one that we probably are already seeing that we're going to have to do it, so why ride it out if we can fix it now, I guess. That's...
One last question, and I realize this is reflective of tonnage costs going up from waste management, and if you maybe you know now, maybe you don't, I'd love to find out. If you look back at the pandemic years, where my guess would be consumption at home would have driven tonnage higher because a lot of people working from home. How has our 2022 or your current tonnage compared to the prior years? Are we just seeing cost increases purely because of rate, not because of tonnage?
It's mostly the rate. We did see an increase in solid waste tonnage during 21. It took a little while in 20 to pick up, but it did, 20 and 21. Now let me see if I can... I've got solid waste tonnage and recycling tonnage. Recycling tonnage is a little tougher to read because if you think about the difference between a glass bottle and a plastic bottle, it can be all over the place. But our solid waste tonnage in 2020 averaged 245 tons. In 21, we were at 246 tons. This year so far, we're down to 223, and so we're kind of seeing it coming back down. And that's kind of consistent with everything else you're hearing about.
Sure.
Kind of post-COVID.
Exactly. Okay. Yeah. So it really does speak to just a wild, wicked rate increase. Okay. Great. All right. Thank you for that.
Just to clarify for the committee. The way the general fund and the reserve accounts work is that if something is, like for instance, we don't hire somebody, we budget in a personnel change or something, and we don't hire that person, that the money doesn't just go away, it goes into our reserve account. So that, as I mentioned to Andrew, that's our safety net for unforeseen circumstances. And I think the way he and I first had discussed this is that it works both ways, is that's what that account is there for. So and this variance has only been in the last 2 or 3 months. we don't know what it's going to, it could go on for the next several years. It's all tied into world events, realistically. One of the major, well, whatever.
Yeah.
And so, our hesitation was that we, in a way, sort of knee-jerk. Now, granted, by the time the deliberative session, we may, realize some different numbers. But right now, here on November 2nd, our thought was that, all right, if we underspend the budget, it goes into our reserve account. And if something happens beyond our control, that's what that account is there for. It's not ideal, but that is there, for us to take care of unforeseen circumstances. So that was sort of our thinking as the subcommittee. But
also, I would point out too, Bob, that the budget is a bottom line budget. So basically in the general fund, we are prohibited from overexpending the bottom line without DRA approval. We also can't spend from our unassigned fund balance in the general fund without town meeting appropriation. So there's some limitations on.
True.
The other thing was, in terms of the millions, I'll put it in quotation fingers, that our fund balance is an equity position, it's not cash, and it's the accumulation of several years of building it up. It's not a single year number. So that's something to also understand as well.
So again, that is another limitation with the town meeting form of government. We have one shot. So yeah, there are a lot of variables here. So it's, just so we make informed decisions. Chris?
Beginner question. So on the flip side, if you over budget, it means the tax rate gets set higher, and then that extra money would go into the general fund? Is that?
If you over budget and say you would generate a surplus, we set our tax rate based on appropriations. So the short answer to your question is yes, we would set the tax rate in accordance with the higher number if it was in the budget that way.
And then if you didn't spend it, it would just go into the general fund?
Yeah, it would become, if you didn't spend it, it would become general fund surplus. So it would add to the unassigned fund balance that we operate under.
So that's kind of the pros and cons of,
Yeah.
Okay.
I just want to say, I know you keep saying you're new, but I'm not new, and I'm forgetting something all the time, or forgetting something and need to be reminded. Either way, it's Groundhog Day for me sometimes. But I think what Russ brought up about, that you can't just go, oh, we need 70,000 because we didn't budget it and just pull it out of the general fund. That you have to get all these approvals, and that just adds. This more time taken away from someone doing their job, more time just to get it approved. So I think that's, I learned something today. I think it's important to know too. And I get it, you don't want to, like you say, we can pull it from the general fund, but you also say, well, we don't want to, spend what's in the general fund because that's our safety net.
Oh,
so we gotta,
it's not ideal. It's not ideal. So, as it stands now, the budget is $1,090,000, and certainly entertain any discussions.
I vacillated and changed my mind about 2 or 3 times during this discussion, but I come back to where I was earlier, which is that I'm willing to make a motion to add half of the amount that was over and above the 1,090,000 to bring it to 1,125,000 to budget for what is the present reality, which is different than when this was made. And I have faith in I know the select board is going to chomp on this, and the town manager, and there's going to be a little bit more data available, maybe. So. But I prefer to budget on reality.
So you're making a motion to add 35,000
Yeah, I
to
do.
the recycling contract?
Well, for that line, line 55082, the increase would be 119,000, not 94,000, and the new budget for that line would be $1,125,000.
Correct. Second.
Motion.
That's the motion from Zwan.
Did you just second that, Joe?
Yes, I did.
Any further discussion? $1,125,000 for line 55082 has been moved and seconded. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? It's a vote.
Thank you for that. We need to. Bob?
Sure.
It sounds like there's going to be an ongoing issue with recycling. Is that something that the Sustainability Committee or who might look into that too?
Judy, I'm so glad you asked. Yes, it's something we are going to be advising the town on and looking at a variety of things. But a lot of the things that we talked about here tonight about recycling are grim realities of the global recycling market. That, in fact, most plastics, even though valuable ones, are really downcycled if there's any market for them at all. 91% of all the plastics that leave this town, of numbers 1, 2, and 5, 91% of those never get recycled. Only 9% actually make it to recycling. And that's an annual average. It's lower now. Right now, there's very little market for that stuff at all. So really, the question is, how do we stem the flow? How do we put less into the stream, right? It's not a very valuable use of a petrochemical, it turns out. So, it's a very hot discussion at our level, at an advisory committee level, and we'll be looking to work with the town to recommend things to do,
So that may have more to do with people selling products, how they package them.
It's pretty, think about every day you wake up, all the things you come in contact with of one of those 7 numbers of packaged plastic. Even things when you think you're doing the right thing, they sneak in a little something somewhere, don't they? A piece of film, a piece of whatever, and they've been very valuable for, making food last longer and all sorts of wonderful things. I mean, there's been a lot of great things with that, but we've in 50 short years, our society has gone from virtually no plastics to an immense number. The tonnages we're talking about, even as a town, are staggering, and we're just a little town of 16,000 people. So,
Chris?
Just a quick one. So there's a lot we can't change as a town, but I know that. It seems like most people in this room know it, but I think a lot of people in town don't even realize that as far as like cleaning out the plastic. I've got a 19-year-old kid. I got a reminder, Emma, you just finished your yogurt, rinse it out well, then put it in the recycling. I mean, I'm thinking maybe the electronic signboards, that would be we could be flashing different messages, be sure to rinse out your recyclables if you want them to be recycled, or just little constant reminders of different little, I know it's not a lot, but it's something positive. And I think assuming that people know is probably not a good idea. And
Well, hopefully we don't have to pass out water bottles like rye. The boil water order.
Yeah.
Okay, the next item that we had as a subcommittee in this division is 55150, household hazardous waste. This is conducted, the HHW Day is a fall event, and it occurred 3 weeks ago on a Saturday. And we host it for ourselves and 6 other communities. Andrew and I looked at the historical spending. Typically the way we do it, this is budgeted that we pay everything and then we bill the other towns. And then there's a revenue component to it. But looking back over the last several years, from our perspective, the numbers have always been somewhere between the high 20s to the low 30s and not up close to 40. So our recommendation was to adjust this line to $35,000, which is more than it's been in any one of the last 5 years. So that was our intent. Any discussion?
Bob, is there an offset? Because I remember paying to do that.
There is an offset.
Okay.
But, it's hard. This is one of those budgeting items sometimes, like back in the 90s, it seemed like the line would stretch along for miles of people coming to these. They're not, just because people were busy or whatever, they don't seem to be as well attended as maybe they were in the past. So yes, we pay for everything, and then there's a revenue offset, but the budget is for what we pay out, and then we bill the other towns. But again, we haven't seen the net, which this budget would be, or the gross, close to the 42,000. So we thought we'd more accurately portray that number.
Did the department agree with that?
I don't know.
So I think there's a couple of things going on. One, there is a grant that we do receive from New Hampshire DES, which is typically on the order of $10,000. I suspect that you're not seeing that reflected in the overall costs, that it's already subtracted out by RPC, who is actually kind of the manager of the program for all of the communities. So I don't think that it would be the end of the program by any means, but I'd just like to put out a cautionary tale that Russ and I met with Tredebi and RPC in September, the month before the Household Hazardous Waste Day was held, and we almost canceled it this year. Because just like we had the conversation about recycling and the stockpiling and the lack of market, there is no market, I shouldn't say market isn't really the right word, but
facilities.
The facilities that handle hazardous waste are maxed out. There are 2 that are offline. There aren't that many across the country. And they honestly couldn't tell us if they were going to be able to take our material.
Ooh.
And we were very close. So I'm sure costs are going to be going up for that. We've been talking about going back out to bid again for a waste hauler for this particular event. And the reason you're seeing less queue is because we've gone to a pre-registration where you're coming within a half-hour window rather than the entire period.
Yeah.
So we're getting better management of the flow of the use. But I think the counts are pretty consistent.
Yeah, there's only a certain amount of spots per hour that are allocated now. So it used to be sort of a free-for-all, and now with the way they've tightened the process and the challenges that we have with that, we've had to limit the amount of people or cars to sign up. And that's the same for all, I think it's 4 towns that participate in this, 4 or 5.
Jen said 6 on that.
I think it's 6 or 7. But I lose track of them myself. Seabrook.
It's most of the surrounding towns.
Yeah, there's quite a few.
It's a great program. It's
awesome.
Very successful.
It's been going on since the 80s.
And just to speak to the 35,000, I mean, I think no matter what you have as an expense line, we'll offset it with revenue that comes in. So it doesn't necessarily have a big impact when you reduce it from 42 to 35, because the program will still be the program. It'll still run. Right. It'll still generate its
I just
revenue.
wanted to more accurately portray, the budget based on the
gross number.
5-6 years.
That's a gross number, the 35 to 40,000.
Can you make a motion? No.
I'll motion.
Put your head on the table. That's what you do.
Well, thank you.
35,000.
I'll second. Thanks, Chris.
See, Andrew, you need to sit here because you can hide under the table.
Yeah, if you had it
You can't
there,
hide.
yeah.
If I pick up my feet, I can hide.
It's just more, I don't know how to do it really, so.
That's fine. So Chris Newport has moved at the subcommittee's recommendation, and Chris Sigmund has seconded a rebudgeting of this line 55150 to $35,000. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? It's a vote.
Yeah, the problem with possibly canceling the October event is, what do people do with that material? They just empty it out into a ditch?
Yes, Judy, the solution to pollution is dilution, so you just put it in the river.
Well, if it's full of toxic waste, it'll just melt everything. So that'd be good.
Burn pits.
So I have to make light because this is really heavy, scary stuff. So.
Heavy metal.
Did you ever get any answers on landfill monitoring?
I don't have any detailed answers, so I apologize.
This is usually around $15,000 to $20,000 per round, and we do 2 rounds a year, and it shows the 2021 actual was only the 16,000, so we were, just in looking at it, we do have another round of testing coming up at the end of this year, so that budget should be mostly spent. So it might have been a coding thing or just, I don't know, but there were two rounds last year, so it's not like we're underspending this line. So it's just more of an administrative note for everyone.
And we've also had additional parameters added to the permit. I think you've all heard about PFAS or PFOA, and one for dioxane have been added to the permit. And they're all expensive tests, and we have multiple wells. It's not like a single well site. We're talking, 14 monitoring points that have to be monitored. So when we get additional parameters in our permit, it does get costly. So I think the sampling and analysis from earlier this year will at least be repeated, if not added. I think there were 5 more sites that we wanted to include the PFOA, PFAS, and dioxane testing in. So I foresee before the end of the year we'll be at about $35,000.
Okay, any other questions on the solid waste disposal division? Corey, do we have an updated benefits total? No change like there's health. So it should be the same, right?
That's correct.
Okay. So with the changes to the disposal contract line and the HHW line, do we have a new bottom line?
Solid waste disposal total is $1,407,523. 1407523.
I'll make a motion.
Second.
Chris Suter and Tom. 27. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you. Streetlights, we had no significant changes, just a note. We did, as a town, convert the LED bulbs for energy efficiency 3 years ago, and that's a 5-year payoff that we pay Unitil. So hopefully this number will go down in the near future. So I will entertain a motion for $169,000 for the streetlights budget.
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you. Stormwater. Contracted services here, as the note in the narrative report indicates, due to reduced staff in the department and the unavailability of some contractors, we have not been able to do all of the work that we've wanted to do this year so far. But there are a number of projects that are listed for 2023, and the indication, and hopefully I'm not speaking out of turn, is that some monies will be encumbered to do those projects for next year.
And I actually think we've done some major work in the past month. I think you all know we were in a drought this year, and we were waiting for rainfall to be able to do some first initial water sampling that we couldn't do in our stormwater program because it was drought. So we've just done that, and that's a fairly expensive operation. It does require multiple people out testing and sampling during the rain event. So I think that we'll be fairly close to being expended for this year, and we have continued, we're in a permit cycle, so we've got more work that we need to do next year. Very similar to what we're doing this year, but with some minor changes.
Just for comparison, last year, the budget was $46,740, and we spent all but about $3,000 of that. So we're usually pretty good at doing the work that needs to be done to comply with our MS4 permit. And then just the other note on the catch basin replacement, Jay, again, as part of his on paper and in his head GIS program, he has a list of catch basins that need to be upgraded, basically putting in new sumps and things like that to comply with our permit. And those will be done as part of the paving work to be done later on this fall.
That's mind-boggling. So Jay has to carry this stuff around in his head?
Well, in the absence of a GIS system, that is, I mean, it's in a notebook, but knowing him, he's got it all. He's got it all up here. He does a great job with keeping things clicking along.
We have a list. I know we're teasing Jay a little bit. He does have great recall, but we do have a list of catch basins that don't have, we are required to have at least a 3-foot sump to be able to capture sediments so that they don't just continue on out to the receiving waters. And so we're going through all of that list, and we try to do 7 per year. That's what our plan is, that we report on every year.
But the problem that you're talking about is you have a paper list for that somewhere, and you have paper lists for other kinds of things, and paper. And some of the stuff is entered in the GIS system. It may be complete, it may not be complete, and nobody quite knows.
It makes it very challenging. Not a single person could look at what we have in our system right now and say without any doubt, this is what we have. It requires input from the highway team, Jay and his staff. It requires input from the engineering team. After a couple of days, we can generate the information, but it's not like we can just push a button and get the response.
One thing that came up, and I was going to mention this during the GIS technician discussion, but one thing that I was made aware of recently, which is really interesting, is we put the TIF district in place a few years ago, and that's provided some significant revenues to the town and allowed for a lot of growth in the tax base. But it's almost, in some ways, be careful what you wish for, because the infrastructure is static. And so as these new development projects go in, we have to make sure that the infrastructure, both the pipes as well as facilities, can handle all of this, the new flows. It's both stormwater as well as water and sewer. And so, again, we need to have documents on a computer, on a drawing that show, so we can do capacity analysis and watershed analysis and things like that. And a lot of times our drawings are incomplete just because we don't have anybody to be able to take information and then write it down in a drawing. So it's a really critical piece of information that the town needs, based on what we have been asked to do by the regulatory folks over the last 10 years.
Briefly, Mr. Chair, could you just quantify the size of this problem in terms of how many catch basins and how long are we going to be doing this?
Jay has his list here.
Oh, pardon. We're going to be doing this for a while?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay, that's all.
Oh, in perpetuity.
Yeah.
Really.
Okay.
Because if it's not one thing, it's catch basins and infiltration, leaky pipes now.
Yeah.
But 5 years from now, it could be anything else. We may have to, we had that nitrogen, the facility that we were looking at over on Winter Street that we were going to pay for by ARPA funds. There may be a dozen of those around town that we have to do to keep our stormwater relatively clean.
But big picture for the viewers, these are old catch basins that need to be upgraded to the current standards. And there are, dozens, hundreds?
Over 100.
Over 100 of these things that we need to peck away at. Got it. Yeah, thank you.
So the stormwater total, I don't think that's changed, Corey, has it? 92,360?
It has not changed.
I'll entertain a motion for that number.
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? And the new subtotal before maintenance, Corey.
4,558,641. 4,558,641.
Can you, does your, this is spreadsheet update, so the original budget was for a 1% increase, so I'm assuming it's like 1.1 maybe? 1.5. Cool.
Excuse me.
Okay. So on to maintenance. No, that's just a cumulative number. We don't have to vote on it. So Public Works Maintenance, page 22. Not a lot that the subcommittee had to really delve into here. It's all pretty self-explanatory. You know, there are a couple of notes in the post-COVID environment. Our COVID expenses specifically have gone down, but it's sort of a new world order on custodial approaches to cleaning things. So those, and just, the durable goods, as our maintenance supervisor indicated, have all gone up through the roof. So those numbers are up. And then there's no object number, but down at the bottom of page 22, fire safety, it's a new line, $18,000. You'll see that this shows up in the water and the sewer budgets as well. The fire department used to do in-house monitoring of fire alarm systems for the town buildings, and they passed that back on to the Department of Public Works, actually 2 years ago, wasn't it? And we sort of did a little shell game and figured it out last year without having to budget for it, but this year there's a budget for it.
We had put it in the individual building maintenance line items that we have, say for town offices. And the problem is that it chews away pretty significantly at what we can do for maintenance in very busy town buildings. So we felt we really should have it in a standalone line because we were overexpended on most of those building lines, and will be overexpended this year. So,
any questions on the general maintenance, Tom?
Regarding that fire safety line item, I'll totally defer to your judgment as to what needs to be alarmed and what doesn't need to be alarmed, but I think the fire chief there was some kind of an offline conversation that was had about what actually needed to be alarmed and didn't need to be alarmed. I mean, certainly don't want to lose any critical infrastructure for lack of an alarm, but has that been looked at critically in terms of what absolutely needs to be alarmed versus what used to be alarmed? Because it's a large number. So I think, a thorough inventory, both in terms of DPW, town buildings, water and sewer, should be done, and it should be looked at critically as to, what is totally necessary and what's need, what's want, what's nice.
I guess we
just
should
sort of
ask,
putting that out there. Given the cost of it.
we did do that. We actually worked with Deputy Chief Pizon pretty closely to determine which facilities should be alarmed, and that was through all of the general fund and public and water and sewer. So we've been operating under that understanding for 2 years now.
And the reason why there's a number now, I went back a number of years to try to see where it was in the fire budget, and they just had staff that were technically competent to be able to go out and monitor the alarm systems and all of that. Public Works does not, so we'll be contracting that out, is my understanding. So that's why there's an expense number versus have it just be part of the salary.
Oh, and I understand. Yeah,
and the fire department noted they had a $20,000 reduction in overtime, which accounted for their servicing fees. So,
There you go.
shows back up here.
As Russ says, rob Peter to pay Paul. So they get a reduction, we get an increase. Okay, so any other questions in maintenance general? New benefits total, Corey?
New benefits is $145,609, 145,609.
Thank you. And a new general maintenance total.
$597,066, 597,066.
So moved. Chris Suter?
Seconded. Oh, someone? I keep beating people out. Sorry, Chris. Go ahead.
Second.
You need buzzers.
General maintenance for 800. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you. Town buildings, we had no comments on this. It's just general maintenance items for the various town buildings. Any questions?
Is this the maintenance list, or am I?
No.
This is different,
That's
isn't
next.
it? That's this.
That would be next.
Yeah, okay.
So I'll entertain a motion for $303,607 for the town buildings budget.
So moved. Judy?
Second.
Thank you. Further discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you. Now, maintenance projects.
Right.
For those new to the committee, the town has a laundry list of various in-house projects. Some of them can be fairly large. And we've tried to, over the years, get a handle on the amount of that, and we've sort of settled on the amount of $100,000. Seems to have worked pretty well. Sometimes we exceed that slightly, and sometimes we're under it. So it seems like a nice middle ground, gives the Public Works Department enough latitude to do some fairly major projects, ADA improvements and things like that, or HVAC improvements, but also we haven't changed it every year. It does remain fairly static and seems to have worked out pretty well. I don't know if anyone has any questions about the actual list, or, in the past we've sort of debated the efficacy of certain lines, which is, in my view, a little bit beyond our scope, but we can certainly weigh in if someone would like. If not, the subcommittee supported keeping it at $100,000. I'll entertain a motion thereof.
So moved. Suter?
Zigwan, second.
All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you. So that's that. Mechanics Garage, similar as above, just general, some things, health insurance has, gone down quite a bit, but all the items appear to be tracking appropriately for the time of year that the report was generated. Any questions on the Mechanics Garage division?
For informational purposes, how are we staffed as far as actual maintenance people in that department? Or actual mechanics in that department?
We were fully staffed until yesterday. We just received a resignation notice from one of the mechanics. But we'll have that posted shortly.
Thank
I'm very
you.
impressed you were able to get vehicle equipment stock down to just 4 things: fluids, filters, bulbs, nuts, and bolts. That's very impressive.
He said,
They're magicians. Let me just say, they are magicians.
They are good.
In that
Yes,
shop.
and we thank them.
So new benefits total, Mechanics Garage, Corey?
$100,627, 100,627.
Thank you. And Mechanics Garage total.
$282,807. 282807.
Entertain a motion thereof.
So moved.
Second, Suter.
Rowan.
All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you. So, total Public Works budget, Corey.
$5,842,120. 5842120.
Any discussion, further discussion on that as a total for the Public Works Department, general? I'll entertain a motion for $5,842,120.
So moves.
Second, Judy.
All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you.
So if we see duct tape showing up in the vehicle equipment stock, we should start worrying. Chewing gum and duct tape.
Exactly.
What is that percentage, if I may?
It is 1.7%.
So that's excellent.
Jennifer, is there a DPW museum or someplace you can drop off your old catchment covers or other materials to?
Can you make a planter on the whole package?
We get really creative, I have to say. Jay probably could come up with a use for.
Yeah, we pretty much do.
So we have a few vehicles. This is not going to be discussed in detail tonight, but just as a heads up for CFP night in 2 weeks. There were 3 vehicles contemplated by Public Works. They're noted on page 57 is the sidewalk tractor. The current equipment is quite old. Most of the general maintenance parts are no longer available, and the subcommittee will be recommending this purchase. There's also a half-ton pickup, existing pickup number 5. It's got 100,000 miles or so, and whenever the Public Works lately has been upgrading their pickup trucks, that they're trying to multi-function them, so getting a plow package and four-wheel drive is the preference. So they'll be a little bit more versatile for the department. And the subcommittee will be recommending this one as well. Then the dump and plow truck number 33, shown on page 52, is currently on the deferment list, and the subcommittee did not want to change that.
Just noticed CIP page 48, but tractor number 57.
Thank you.
Page 57.
Oh, I'm sorry. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Chair?
Yes.
Jen? So just to clarify, the decision to defer dump and plow truck number 33 was already made before the subcommittee chopped?
Correct. That was on the in-house deferment list.
Okay.
So there's only one warrant article that would be considered right now for Public Works, and this would be also in water and sewer as well. Last year, or 3 years ago, we allocated $25,000 to do some preliminary layouts on what an updated Public Works garage out on Newfields Road might look like, and an architect came up with some general plans. Last year, there was a warrant article for $50,000 that had been presented to continue review of how much the scope of that building might be within the town's interests, and then also doing some site planning on a piece of property that the town owns adjacent to the campus out on Newfields Road. That was defeated at town meeting this year. We had a general comment, the original intent for this warrant article in 2019 was that the existing garage was built many decades ago when we had a much smaller staff using it. And between vehicles and people, the HVAC systems, the ventilation systems are inadequate now for general long-term habitation in that garage, certainly for offices. And also a lot of we spend a lot of money on to keep our equipment, especially snowplow equipment and the vac truck for the sewer department, things like that, undercover. They're multi-hundreds of $1,000 vehicles, and like to keep them undercover if possible. And this building is structurally unable to withstand a certain level of snowstorm. I think we found it was like 3 feet of snow a number of years ago, maybe 2.
It can be less than that. It depends on
We had
the
people up on the
density.
roof shoveling because there were some, it was a little bit dicey there for a while. The bottom line is it's an old facility. We don't maybe necessarily need a Taj Mahal out there, but we do need something. And so there was an intent to, sort of continue the work of a few years ago, present another $50,000 again to sort of hone in on the scope of the building, i.e. the size, what its exact function might be, and then maybe fit that a little bit differently to what the interests of the town are in view of all the other projects that we have going on. So that will be discussed in a couple of weeks. So that is Andrew's and my report. Judy?
Well, would that future project include forward-looking charging stations and that kind of thing?
I think what we need to consider is for the next 30 years or more, what do we need for facilities for our town? We have this TIF district where we're building apartment complexes. The town has added 5,000 or 6,000 people in the last 20 years. The infrastructure and the crews that support that needs to change. So I think what we need to see is, all right, it's similar to the public safety complex and the rec project and the library. There's what we maybe need, and then there's what we can afford, and our job is to sort of figure out where in the middle an appropriate facility is. So that's, I think what we're trying to do is to continue that analysis and come up with that number.
I'm just trying to get in Chris's notion of planning is when you need to include these other elements that will be essential in the future.
Yeah, I think this would go some way towards that. I think this is going to be more where on that piece of land would this fit, and then how big should it be? For X dollars, and what is the budget that it should be? We did that quite effectively with the library and certainly the public safety complex. We set a budget of what we think we can afford first, and then we back designed from that. We didn't say, here's all what we need, and whoa, we can't afford that. We set the budget first, and that's, I think, where we need to be on this as well.
Interestingly, looking at the master plan from 2018, last master plan, there are some really fascinating sea level rise maps in there, and obviously those numbers have even changed since then. I'm curious in the current siting of the DPW area, if we look at a facility that's 30 plus years out, is that going to be high enough above the water to?
Yeah, no, it's a good question, but yes, it is. We did do that, actually the design of the wastewater treatment plant with that in mind, and that's the same site, and that's an even lower location. But you can see from some of the facilities there that they are elevated as far as the equipment location in those facilities. So.
Because I don't think none of those trucks float, right?
No.
Okay.
No.
The duck boats they have? That's going to be that's going to be truck number 33.
Yeah, plow package on that.
Any other comments or questions? Thank you, Jen and Jay, for attending tonight and answering questions, and thank you to the committee for working with Andrew and I on this report. Our next meeting is next Wednesday, when Chris Suter and her subcommittee will be presenting Parks and Rec and Health and Human Services and Welfare to us.
Library.
That will be 6:30 on November 9th here in this room, and until that time, we are adjourned.
I'd like to say that, unlike tonight where you probably want to go home and put your head in the oven after these discussions, it should be a much lighter discussion, easier budget, so I expect it to be too tough.
Thanks for the heads up. See you next week. Thank you.
You can put your head.
Thank you for tuning in to Exeter TV. Exeter TV is the town's public and government access channels, available on Comcast channels 98 and 22. Channel 98 is your channel. If you have an idea for a program, want to host your own talk show, or submit a film, we're here to get your content on television. On Channel 22, we bring you live and replay coverage of government meetings and other town updates. A third channel, Blue Hawk Media, is operated by SAU 16 and can be found on Channel 13, with all your school sports, events, and meetings. You can watch Exeter TV online at exeternh.tv, Apple TV, and on Roku. Find us on social media for extra content. Subscribe to our YouTube channel and hit the bell to get notified about live streams and new content. Tune in to our platforms every other Friday to watch the Exeter Biweekly Report, with recaps of recent events, updates from town departments, and messages from nonprofits in your area. If you head to our website, exeternh.tv, we invite you to sign up to our newsletter to receive monthly updates about new content, upcoming meetings, and more. We'd like to thank you for taking the time to watch Exeter TV and hope that you tune in to our other content as well.